Oh, hello. I think I'm pretty close to being camera ready again, but I thought while I'm still recovering, I did have a couple of video ideas I could do, and one of them is to do my Overhyped books video. So I have a quartet of videos I make every couple of years. One is overhyped books, underhyped books, and correctly hyped books. And then I do a DNF audit. And those are videos that I feel like, would be a little tedious if I did them frequently, but it's nice to kind of take a step back and reflect on my reading for the last, 18 months to 2 years. In this case, nearly 3 years, because the last time I did an overhyped video was in July 2023. So I figured this would be a good candidate for a faceless video because I'm mostly just talking about 10 books here. I do want to start with my definition of overhyped. It's not to me that a book is necessarily bad. It's also not necessarily that it doesn't deserve any hype. I am just saying that based on my subjective experience of the book that I read, when I compare that to the hype for that book prior to reading it, to me, it seems like the expectations that were set up for me are overblown relative to the book I ended up reading. So, some of these are pretty popular. Some of these are, dare I say, classics. Some of them are award-winning. But all of these are just, in my opinion, at least a little bit overhyped. Okay, let's start with, I've got 3 books that are a part of the new and emerging popular genre of romantasy. To me, romantasy is a little different than what I would traditionally think of as fantasy romance or even romantic fantasy. It's also it falls under the umbrella of, but is its own distinct category within the umbrella of speculative romance, which is something that if you watch this channel, I love. I love speculative romance. I dare say that's my favorite kind of romance novel at this point, because the, either sci-fi or fantasy element helps me suspend some disbelief. Yeah, it's my favorite kind of romance to read. I really like it as a genre as a whole. Romantasy, however, as it's kind of emerged in the last few years, I've struggled to connect with. So this is what I don't know what the formal definition of romantasy is. When I hear somebody describe something as being romantasy, I am hearing that as this is a book that reads very much like YA fantasy in terms of not the age of its characters or the sophistication of the writing, but more the types of tropes that are used, a high level of either melodrama or angst, a lot of sort of like chosen one type tropes. It's that, but it also has, smut, like explicitly described sex of some kind. That's kind of what I think of as romantasy. I've kind of in general fallen out of love with YA fantasy in the last few years. Some of that is just as I've aged, but honestly, I've leaned more into middle grade fantasy because to me, I'm more interested, I'm kind of just tired of the angst and the chosen one tropes, which are really common in that subgenre. They're just not my favorite or, what I'm drawn to at this point in my life. So I don't necessarily love that in a book in general. So romantasy, I have struggled to find popular ones that I connect with. All that to say, that was a long preamble to say that there were 3 books I read as a part of a romantasy experiment, that all of these were in the Goodreads Choice Award nominees in their year, and I saw a lot of hype for all 3 of these online, particularly on TikTok, and that was The Hurricane Wars, Assistant to the Villain, and the Jasad Heir. Of those 3, probably The Hurricane Wars is the one that I think of with the most fondness, but none of them are series I would continue in. All of them I found to be over dramatic in a way that did not work for me personally, though I know other people enjoy that mode. It's just not my jam. And then I will say The Hurricane Wars, I think, was the one that I thought was the best written. And then Assistant to the Villain, I thought was the one I could most tell was a debut. I don't know if those books have improved in their writing quality since that first one, but yeah, all of those I would describe as being overhyped. I think that, well, I guess maybe I should say they were overhyped to me as somebody who loves speculative romance. I can't really tell if they're good versions of what they are. I'll say that I don't think any of them, well, I can't even say that. I was going to say I don't think any of them were as good as Sarah J. Maas. I've read one book in the Court of series, but I also didn't think that was very well written. And I couldn't get on with Throne of Glass either. So it might just be that this is not a subgenre for me at all. And if you are an enjoyer of romantasy, I would be curious to hear if you think that those 3 books are ones that if you like romantasy, you would like them. But for me, they were overhyped because I think this was a part of my process of figuring out like, oh, when people talk about romantasy, they're not talking about what I've traditionally thought of when I think about fantasy and romance together. I've said the word romance, fantasy, and romantasy so many times they've ceased to have any meaning to me. So let's move on because I can't even tell if I'm making sense anymore. Let's go to Chain Gang All-Stars. This is one that it's a dystopian kind of sci-fi type story, and it's set in the future. The gladiator games have sort of been returned, but they have a dystopian oligarchic capitalist hellscape type spin to them in terms of like sponsorships and a lot of violence. I think it had some interesting things to say. Like I thought the message was good. I enjoyed its use of footnotes, but I just ultimately didn't feel like there was enough surprise, character development, or plot to sustain a full novel. It felt to me like this could have been a really successful novella, but I just felt like as a full novel, it just didn't have enough going on. And I would call it overhyped because I think I got picked for at least one of the kind of big book clubs, maybe Read with Jenna. I can't remember, but I know it got picked for some of the like big national celebrity book clubs. It is a good book club book, I guess, because there is like interesting things going on in it to talk about. But I just didn't think it was as high in its literary quality as I was hoping, nor was it high enough in entertainment value to sort of compensate for that. So yeah, I would read more shorter things from this author, but I don't know about a novel. I'm not necessarily that eager to get back in the water with a novel from this author. Let's go to something else extremely popular that I think at this point I would call overhyped. And I'll talk a little bit about why. And that is Frida McFadden. I've read 3 books from her. I've read The Housemaid's Secret, The Coworker, and Never Lie. I would say when I first read her, I would not have called her overhyped because I was like, this is extremely page-turning, popcorn, entertaining reading. Is it good? No. Is it high quality? Certainly not. But is it entertaining? Sure. But I would say as I read, like, the more of her I read, the less I found the hype to be worth it because her books are incredibly samey. So I feel like if you've read 1 or 2, you kind of get what she does and they get less entertaining as a result. I think for somebody with this level of popularity, I think I would expect like more entertainment factor and I guess maybe a little more variety. I don't know. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, who's a good example? There are very popcorn entertaining writers out there who I think at least have some more variety to what they're doing, even if the actual writing isn't super high quality. Maybe Colleen Hoover would be an example of that, though I've only read Verity and I'm just surmising from some of the other plots as I've heard them described. But like, there's just not, I think if you could read 1 and be done. So like the fact that she continues to crank out like 5 books a year and they continue to be that popular is kind of surprising to me, and therefore I feel like she's a little overhyped. You know what? Maybe Nora Roberts would be an example of like somebody who I think does deserve the hype despite being extremely popular and having, trust me, I think I'm at like 180 books in of her nearly 300 books. I've read a lot of Nora Roberts, and I can talk to you at length about the similarities between the different books. She definitely has things she goes back to, character types, recurring plot themes, recurring settings, things like that. I'm not saying that I'm not criticizing Frida McFadden for having repeating themes or repeating quirks to her writing. I think that's completely natural if you're writing that number of books in a similar genre. But I just think that there's not, at least over the 3 books I read, there's just not enough variety. And I think you can kind of read one and be done. So in that sense, I feel like she's overhyped in terms of having ongoing success. It would make more sense to me if she had like a couple of books that were really hyped and then people kind of dropped off, but that doesn't seem to be what's happening. She still seems to be extremely popular. So in that sense, I find her as a writer of entertainments to be overhyped, because I just don't think her work, remains entertaining, at least to me. Maybe if you absolutely love the tropes that she does and absolutely love how she does her plots, maybe you just can't get enough. But for me, I have had enough. Okay, 2 other very well-regarded literary books. Wolf Hall, I've talked about this one. I feel like I've talked about this one a lot. I'll say it again. It's overhyped to me because it's considered to be a modern classic, and I found it incredibly tedious and very uninteresting if you were at all familiar with that period of history. It's just like a slightly narrativized textbook, in my opinion. So the fact that this is genuinely considered to be like, oh, this is a book that's going to enter the canon, or this is a trilogy that's going to enter the canon, I'm like, girl, where? I don't understand. I do not understand how this got to be so hyped. And then Tender as the Flesh by Agustina Bazterrica, I think is the author. It's okay, but I am surprised. To me, it's the definition of overhyped, because people really built up my expectations for it. I thought that, the premise is very grabby, that it has to do with like a society where people are eating humans as fellow humans as meat. And, somebody who is in the overclass making some kind of connection with a human who is marked for a meat factory. Yeah, like that's a provocative setup, but it's not a necessarily uncommon one, at least in its kind of overall contours. Like maybe not that exact scenario, but there's a lot of similar type scenarios where it's like exploring man's inhumanity to man. And as soon as we got at the beginning of this, I was like, okay, based on other short stories and stuff that I've read that have similar theming or similar setups, I can imagine kind of 2 to 3 places that this is probably going to go. But my thought was like, oh, but this is so hyped. It's definitely not going to go one of those places because everybody's saying this is so fresh and so good and whatever. And no, it went exactly, I thought it went to one of the immediate things I thought it might do. So I just didn't find it as fresh, I guess, in that respect. And I didn't really connect with the writing. It's very flat, and I should say it is in translation, so that may, that certainly could be a contribution. I don't know. Insert entire discussion about translation and how it impacts our view of books. The writing, that type of style, I think sustains itself better for a short story. I think for a novel, it's not to my taste for the writing to be so purposefully affectless. So yeah, this is one I very much want people to like temper their expectations, because it seems to me that this book is overhyped. And so I would like to give you a better reading experience than I had by saying, maybe it's not as groundbreaking as people talk about it being. And then maybe you'll enjoy it more than I did. So there we go. Okay, a book that I thought was good, that I enjoyed. I think I gave this 3.5 or 4 stars last year. I thought that this was very entertaining, but people have talked about it like it was really groundbreaking, and I just don't see that. And that is You Are Fatally Invited by Andy Pelago, I believe is the author. I thought that this was really fun. It's a very good, it's a solid version of an isolated closed circle mystery set on an island, I believe, and like they've all been drawn to a central location, and now they're going to get got. Oh, I love that as a premise. And I will say, I think that The Ending Rights itself that just came out by Evelyn Clark, I think that You Are Fatally Invited is an extremely similar story and is a better version of The Ending Rights itself. But still, even with that being said, it's not that revolutionary of a version of this trope. Like, it's a fine version of the trope, but I saw a lot of people talking about it like it was really, I don't know, maybe they just hadn't, this is probably me being biased because I just love this trope and therefore read as many of them as I can, but I was like, this is not really breaking very new ground in this, sub genre. Like, this is pretty, standard stuff that I enjoyed. But yeah, anyway, I've been a little surprised that people have talked about that one the way that they have, but it is very entertaining, so I would certainly recommend it. Second to last one, Into Thin Air by Jon Krakauer. Listen, if you've been watching the channel, I'm deep into my Everest stuff. And I came to this book not having enjoyed previous work from him, so like already kind of being like, okay, his writing style isn't really my favorite in terms of as nonfiction. I have some issues with how he writes stuff. This is like the definitive version of this tale. Like this is, or the canonical, let's say. This is sort of the received canonical version of the book, or of this event. And, so I obviously have to read it. And I just think, having read all of the Everest 96 memoirs and articles and all that, this is just so not the best one, in my opinion. Like, the one that I really wish people would read is the Sheer Will one from Mike Groom. I like it because it's strictly from his point of view. He's not trying to represent things that he wasn't there from, or that he wasn't there for. I just think it's a really good version of the story. I think he does a really good job of like kind of giving his impressions of things and not maybe going beyond his scope would be the way I would say it. I think he does a good job of kind of showing where he doesn't remember things, or like he thinks something, but he doesn't know why somebody else thinks something else. Another one that I think is good is Lena Gammelgard's Climbing High. It's got a much more distinctive writing style that I don't think people will always love, but I do like that she does a lot of sort of narrative suggestions in the text where she's like, I think this is what happened. I think this is what time it was, but it's less definitive. So I think in terms of firsthand accounts, those would be the two I would recommend instead. And I just think Into Thin Air, I've not read the latest preface to the 30th anniversary edition that just came out, but from what I understand, he still isn't fixing or actually fully correcting all the factual errors. And I think his portrayal of certain people is still very dated to the 90s in terms of his own cultural and maybe personal animus against people. It's an interesting book, and it's one I certainly have to engage with in the writing project I'm working on right now. But I wish it wasn't the canonical version, because I think his approach to quote unquote investigative journalism is just like really got some problems with it. And I guess I'll just leave it there. So I think it's overhyped. I wish it wasn't the one that was accepted as canon. And then the last one, I DNF'd this book, The Mystery Writer by Sulari Gentle. And I wouldn't put it on a list like this, except for the fact that it won an Edgar Award. And that shocked me. So I just wanted to mention, I can't believe that of her books, this is the one. Maybe she's won another Edgar Award. I don't know. But this one, in my opinion, certainly did not deserve that. I thought that it was definitely, it's the one I DNF from her. I thought it was the dullest and the least interesting. The main character was too stupid to live in a way that didn't interest me. So yeah, color me confused about how that one won. Maybe there wasn't a very strong field of candidates that year. I don't know. But yeah, I think that just got announced when I was putting this together sometime in the last few months, and that surprised me. So I thought I would mention, I think I disagree with the Edgars on this one. I think that The Mystery Writer is overhyped. Okay, I've been yapping for quite a while now, but yeah, those are my overhyped books. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you disagree with any of these and you think that they deserve the hype, or you think they're maybe even underhyped. I think part of what's interesting about these kinds of lists is it's so driven by our own experience of what's been marketed to us, or what our friends have recommended to us, or what we've seen on YouTube. So I feel like everybody's level of hypage for a given book is different. So I think that's part of what's an interesting dynamic in these kinds of discussions, is that, maybe one of these books was you barely heard of. So when you read it, it exceeded your expectations because you didn't have any going in. I don't know. Anyway, side philosophical tangent there. Yeah, I hope you guys are well. I have another video that I'm going to finish filming soon, and that will also be going up soon. So I'm back-ish, and I'm happy to be back-ish. Yeah, hit the bell if you want to know when those go up. Subscribe, like, all that good stuff. Take care of yourself. Take care of your community, and we will just talk again soon. Bye.